best friend stole my husband. My family took her side. They betrayed me at Christmas. I exposed their darkest secrets. They thought I would break, but I came back stronger. I never thought my life would turn into one of those nightmare soap operas you see on TV. I always believed I was careful with who I let into my circle, who I trusted with my secrets, my home, and my family. But looking back, I realize I let the wrong person in. And the cost? My marriage, my dignity, and the people I thought would defend me no matter what. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up with Emily, my so-called best friend. We met in elementary school and were inseparable ever since. If you saw me, you saw her. Sleepovers, birthdays, even family vacations. She was practically part of my family. My mom adored her. My dad said she was the daughter he never had, and my siblings trusted her like one of their own. When I started dating my husband Mark in college, Emily was the first person I introduced him to. She cheered for us, told me how lucky I was, and even helped me pick out my wedding dress when the time came. She stood right beside me as my maid of honor on my wedding day, holding my bouquet, wiping my tears, and whispering, "You're the luckiest girl in the world." At the time, I believed her. Fast forward a few years. Mark and I had built a stable life together. We had a cozy house, decent jobs, and plans for a family. But then Emily started showing up more and more. She'd drop by unannounced with takeout, or call Mark to help her fix something in her apartment, or insist on tagging along on date nights because she didn't want to be alone. At first, I brushed it off. She was my best friend. She was single and lonely. I thought, okay, maybe she just needs company. Mark didn't complain, so I didn't either. But slowly, things started to feel off. I'd walk into the kitchen and catch them laughing at some inside joke I wasn't part of. I'd come home early from work and find Emily sitting way too comfortably on our couch, wearing one of Mark's hoodies. Once, I even saw her pick food off his plate at dinner like it was nothing. When I teased her about it later, she smirked and said, "Well, if you're married, everything's kind of community property, right?" Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. One night, I confronted Mark about it. I told him it felt like Emily was crossing boundaries. He rolled his eyes, kissed my forehead, and said, "Babe, you're overthinking. She's your best friend. You're acting jealous for no reason." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. At least I tried. But then came the first real crack. Emily and I went shopping one afternoon, and out of nowhere she said, "If you ever screw things up with Mark, don't worry. I'll take good care of him." I laughed nervously, waiting for her to say she was joking. But she didn't. She just looked at me with this half smile like she wanted to see how I'd react. I snapped back. "Not funny, Emily." Her eyes twinkled and she shrugged. "Relax. You know I love you. I'd never actually steal him." Except, that's exactly what she did. It happened about 6 months later. Mark had been acting distant, working late, checking his phone constantly, shutting himself in the office whenever I asked too many questions. I chalked it up to stress. But then came the night that shattered everything. I had forgotten my laptop at home during a late shift, so I drove back to grab it. I parked in the driveway, noticed the lights in our bedroom were on, and thought, weird? Mark said he'd be out with friends. I climbed the stairs, pushed open the door, and there they were. Emily, my best friend, in bed with my husband. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Emily gasped and scrambled for the blanket. Mark's face went pale. The room felt like it was spinning, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "What the hell is this?" I screamed. Mark stammered, "It's not what it looks like." Emily interrupted. "Please, just let us explain." Explain? How do you explain betrayal like that? How do you explain the fact that the two people I trusted most in the world were in my bed, in my home, behind my back? I lost it. I grabbed the lamp off the nightstand and hurled it across the room, shattering it against the wall. "Get out, both of you, get out!" Emily pulled on her clothes, tears streaming down her face, muttering apologies that meant nothing. Mark tried to follow me into the hallway, begging me to calm down, but I shoved him away. That night, I locked myself in the guest room and cried until my chest physically hurt. The next morning, I expected my family to rally around me, to storm over and curse Mark and Emily's names, to protect me like families are supposed to. Instead, they did the opposite. When I told my mom what happened, she sighed and said, "Sweetheart, marriages go through tough times. Maybe you should try to forgive him." When I told my dad, he muttered, "Emily's a good girl. She must have had her reasons." Even my younger sister, my own flesh and blood, had the audacity to say, "Maybe if you were paying more attention to Mark, he wouldn't have turned to Emily." I felt like I was in some twisted alternate universe where betrayal was normal and I was the villain for being hurt. The worst part? A week later, I found out my family had actually invited Emily over for dinner. Without me. They sat there eating lasagna with the woman who destroyed my marriage, laughing and talking like nothing happened. When I confronted them, my mom snapped, "We're not going to cut Emily out just because you two had a falling out." A falling out, that's what she called it. Not betrayal, not adultery, not the destruction of my marriage, just a falling out. That's when I realized I wasn't just betrayed by Mark and Emily, I was betrayed by my own blood. And I wasn't about to let them get away with it. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence only makes the liars stronger. And I was done being silent. After that night, I stopped recognizing my own life. Everywhere I turned, betrayal stared back at me. My husband's toothbrush was still in the bathroom, his jacket still hanging by the door, but the sight of them made me sick. Emily's perfume lingered in my bedroom, on the sheets where I used to feel safe. And my family? My family, the people who should have protected me, acted like I was the problem. It felt like the world had turned upside down. I moved into the guest room permanently, then finally packed a bag and stayed with a coworker. Mark sent texts every day. "I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Please, let's talk." He even showed up at my workplace once, red-eyed and desperate, but I walked right past him. I wanted nothing to do with him. But the bigger wound wasn't him. It was my family. I thought maybe they just needed time to process. Maybe once the shock wore off, they'd realize how cruel they were being. But instead, it got worse. My mom called one afternoon and said, "Sweetheart, you can't hold on to anger forever. Mark and Emily, they've been spending a lot of time together. Maybe it wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was fate." Fate? My stomach dropped. Was she really suggesting my husband and my best friend were meant to be? I shouted back, "So I was just a stepping stone, a placeholder until they found each other?" Her silence said everything. Not long after, I found out they were officially dating. And my family? They welcomed Emily with open arms. Family dinners, game nights, even holidays. Emily was there, sitting in my chair, smiling like she had won some grand prize. I wasn't invited. The first time it really broke me was Christmas. Christmas was my favorite holiday, always filled with traditions. Decorating cookies with my sister, watching old movies with my dad, exchanging silly gifts with my mom. That year, I showed up at my parents' house with a tin of cookies, trying to reclaim at least a shred of normalcy. When I walked through the door, everyone went silent. And then I saw her. Emily, sitting by the tree, wearing one of Mark's sweaters, holding my baby nephew on her lap. Mark was beside her, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. I froze. My mom rushed forward, whispering harshly, "You should have told us you were coming." "It's Christmas," I snapped. "I don't need an invitation." My dad cleared his throat. "Listen, maybe it's best if you don't cause a scene. We've all moved on. You should too." Moved on. As if my marriage, my trust, my best friend, none of it mattered. The rage that bubbled inside me in that moment was volcanic. I dropped the tin of cookies on the floor, the lid popping off as they scattered across the carpet. And then I said the words I had been holding in for months. "You're all disgusting. Every single one of you. You call this family? You defend the people who betrayed me and throw me aside like trash? Fine, you can have them, but you'll never have me again." I walked out that night and never looked back. But walking away wasn't enough. Because deep down, I knew Emily loved the victory of it all. She loved knowing she had One, that she had taken my husband, my family, my place. She thrived on the power. And I wasn't going to let her win so easily. So I started documenting everything. I dug through old texts, emails, photos, proof of the times she flirted with Mark behind my back, proof of how long this had been going on. I had voice messages from her bragging about how lucky I was to have him, screenshots of Mark telling me he was working late while he was at her apartment. Piece by piece, I built the timeline of their betrayal. And then I shared it. I didn't scream. I didn't rant. I didn't post some messy emotional breakdown online. I simply dropped the truth. Cold, hard facts in a group chat that included my entire extended family, some mutual friends, and a few people Emily desperately wanted to impress. At first, silence. Then chaos. A cousin messaged me privately. I had no idea. This is messed up. An aunt called me, sobbing, apologizing for believing Emily's lies. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. People saw the truth. People saw who Emily really was. My parents? They were furious with me. My mom accused me of airing dirty laundry and trying to ruin Christmas. My dad said I was being vindictive. But I didn't care. For once, I felt powerful. Meanwhile, Emily's perfect little victory started to crack. Rumors spread. People whispered about how she stole her best friend's husband. Some of her coworkers started giving her the cold. Even Mark looked uneasy in the photos she posted online, like maybe the guilt was catching up to him. And me? For the first time in months, I felt free. I focused on myself. Therapy. New hobbies. Long walks where I let my mind breathe. I started writing again, something I had abandoned years ago. Slowly, I rebuilt. But the universe wasn't done with Emily. About 6 months later, I got a message from her. A long, rambling, desperate message. She and Mark were fighting. He had been texting another woman. She accused him of doing to her what he did to me. And she had the nerve, the actual nerve, to write, "I think you understand better than anyone. I need you." I laughed out loud. The same woman who stole my husband and my family wanted me to comfort her because she was finally tasting her own medicine. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted the message and saved it. Not to expose her, not to humiliate her, just as a reminder. A reminder of how low she had sunk and how far I had risen. Months turned into a year. I haven't spoken to most of my family since that Christmas. It hurts, but I've made peace with it. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who wound you the deepest. But I've also learned something important. Betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you rise after it. And me? I rose higher than they ever expected. Mark and Emily? Last I heard, they broke up. He cheated again. She's alone. My family doesn't talk about it much. They're embarrassed now. Embarrassed they took her side, embarrassed they defended the indefensible. Do I forgive them? Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm not angry anymore. Because in the end, Emily didn't win. She lost everything. And me, I got myself back. Stronger, smarter, unshakable. And that's the kind of victory no one can ever steal.